The Greater Smirks, Part 3. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor, enabling you to understand more about the behaviours of narcissists by conveying my expertise, my worldview, and unravelling the way that others of my kind behave. And we continue by looking at the behaviour of Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, as he is interviewed back when he was Mayor of London. Not only do we see a range of behaviours exhibited by him, but we are also able to see how he functions with regard to the presentation of his smirk. Let's dive straight back into the footage.
All three things I would dispute.
Well, you don't factually dispute them.
Well, I do, and I could, if we had a long time, which we don't, I could explain that I think all three interpretations you're putting on those things aren't wholly fair. And certainly the final thing which you raise, which is the case of my old friend Darius. Yes, it was certainly true that he was in a bit of a state, and I did humour him in a long phone conversation, from which absolutely nothing eventuated.
Whenever you're asked about Prime Minister, and goodness knows Michael Cockerell had a go, you obfuscate. You say, well, I want to be a pop star, I want to be a painter, I want to do all of those things. But you've never actually said what is clearly plain as a pikestaff. Of course, like many politicians, you want to be Prime Minister. Why don't you just say the words? What's the problem?
Look, what I want is to spend the next my time remaining as mayor to do as well as I can as Mayor of London. I've got 3 and a bit years to go.
Hang on,
Eddie.
Make of your inability to give a straight answer.
Halting the footage at the original time of 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Previously, of course, Johnson, to nullify the threat to control and assert control, suggested, why don't you talk about something else? And Eddie Mair responds by stating, the programme talks about something else. Well, this is about your integrity. The programme includes, this is the documentary that he's referring to, your reaction to a phone call from your friend Darius Guppy, asking you to supply the address of a journalist so that he can have him physically assaulted. The words beaten up and broken ribs are said. As this is being stated by Eddie Mair, which basically suggests the leaking of private information to an individual who wishes to do harm to somebody, which eventually makes Boris Johnson a potential co-conspirator in the commission of an assault, you can see Boris Johnson engaging in smirking once again. He finds the recollection of this event not troubling, not embarrassing, not problematic, but actually amusing. And this underpins his greater state that he has no concerns, again, about this being brought up. Other types of narcissists would find this threat to control disconcerting, that he was being accused of such things. He knows that he's going to get away with it once again, and he remains relaxed, allowing, once again, that assertion of control at the high level to be demonstrated over the ignited fury. Inside, it's there, and will be unleashed in certain instances, but here, it's kept well under control. Eddie Mair continues, have you heard that? You tell your friend, Darius Guppy, you will supply the address. What does that say about you, Boris Johnson? Making up quotes, lying to your party leader, wanting to be part of someone being physically assaulted. At this, Boris Johnson grins at the mention of a physical assault. Once more, he just finds it amusing. This whole thing is beneath him, entertaining, and something that isn't really going to land a blow against him. He isn't concerned by these revelations. Many other people would do, but not him. He knows this isn't going to cause him a problem. Eddie Mair then follows up. You're a nasty piece of work, aren't you? He doesn't beat around the bush. He states quite simply what Johnson is, and to some extent he's right. He is a nasty piece of work, lacking remorse, lacking guilt, no conscience, completely driven by the pursuit of the prime aims, which Johnson knows that he is, albeit he may well give them different terms, of course. Note again There's no eruption of united fury against the interviewer. He doesn't lean forward and punch Eddie Mair or slap him or pull his glasses off and grind them under the heel of his shoe. There's no storming off by asserting control by withdrawal. There's no counter-accusations, making threats as a mid-ranger might do. There's no sitting there with an icy glare, saying nothing but staring at the interviewer as a mid-ranger might do. None of that actually occurs. Instead, Boris Johnson looks to nullify the threat to control by dealing with it in a direct assertion of control, and states, Eddie, well, all three things I would dispute. He just dismisses it out of hand. Eddie Mair, well, you don't factually dispute them. Boris Johnson, well, I do. Denial. He's so confident in his ability that matters that have been reported on, that are seen as factual, he's just able to dismiss. If we had a long time, I could explain that all three interpretations you're putting on this aren't wholly fair. From certainly the final thing, he just rejects it. And notice as well, he refers to the final thing. He doesn't even address it in terms of the allegations concerning my involvement in the commission of a physical assault or the situation with Darius Guppy. No, he just calls it the thing, demonstrating again his utter contempt. He doesn't even acknowledge what it is. And he continues by saying, which you raise, which is the case of my old friend, Darius, yes, it was certainly true. He was in a bit of a state. And I did humour him in a long telephone conversation for which absolutely nothing eventuated. Dismissive, arrogant, and he's smirking throughout once again. It's all just a big game to him.
A straight question.
I think people would rightly conclude that I don't want to talk about this subject because I want to talk about what I think should happen, which is the government deserves to win the next election.
Going to the end of the footage, Eddie Mair in this segment states, whenever you're asked about becoming Prime Minister, you obfuscate. I want to be a pop star, I want to be a painter, but you never actually state, plain as a pikestaff. Of course, like many MPs, you want to be a Prime Minister. Why don't you just say the word? What's the problem? This, of course, again, is challenge fuel. He's issuing fuel as a non-intimate secondary source. Johnson knows who he is and has been acquainted with him previously, and he's stating these points to him, but challenging him. There's a threat to control. Boris Johnson responds, look, what I want to spend my time remaining as mayor is to do the best thing that I can as mayor of London. I've got 3 and a bit years to go. I also... Mayor tries to interject and he says, hang on, Eddie. So he doesn't answer the question. He just deflects from it in the usual style. His ignited fury is kept well under control. He just dismisses it, putting it to one side. Eddie Mair interrupts him. Your inability to give a straight answer to a straight question. And then Boris Johnson continues. People would rightly conclude that I don't want to talk about this subject. I want to talk about what I think should happen, and the government wins the next election. He dismisses the question out of hand, doesn't even pay it lip service, and he shifts to what he wants to talk about. He nullifies the threat to control very easily, with supreme confidence. He knows that no blows have been landed upon him. Interestingly, at the time this took place, there was a Guardian article, and it's a left-wing paper, and they stated as such, it must have seemed a good idea at the time, a 15-minute light grilling on the morning BBC sofa with whichever standing presenter the corporation had dredged up to fill the void left by Andrew Marr, still recovering from a stroke. Nothing that an old hand like Boris Johnson need fear. Tussle the hair a little, some self-deprecation and a bit of a plug for the BBC TV documentary on Monday to remind the Tory backbenchers that if the ball ever popped out of the scrum, he would be on hand to take it, almost accidentally over the line. A spot of liberal differentiation from his school chum David Cameron on the benefits of migrants might provide him with an entry to the likely story of the day, the Prime Minister's imminent speech on migrants and access to social housing. But after the 15 minutes of chilling inquisition by the softly spoken Eddie Mair, Johnson's reputation had taken a severe pounding. Indeed, it was probably the worst interview the Mair has ever conducted. It was inevitably described as a car crash, but in the case of Johnson, it was more of a bicycle crash. Spokes all over the road, wheels mangled, and a reputation badly dented. After the opening exchanges, "Good morning, how are you? Very, very good, thank you," Johnson went downhill at an alarming pace until by the interview's close, admitting he had sandpapered quotes as a Times journalist, failing to deny he lied to the party leader at the time, Michael Howard, about an extramarital affair, and conceding that he had humoured an old friend when he asked for a phone number in the knowledge that the friend intended to beat up the owner of it. By the interview's close, "You're a nasty piece of work, aren't you?" was one of Mair's more generous reflections on Johnson's integrity. Doubtless Johnson had been lulled into a false sense of security by the opening minutes in which he was able to hint, without providing incontrovertible proof, that he thought Cameron was misunderstanding the importance of migrants to the London economy. He also gently put the boot into his predecessor as mayor for failing to plan the London Olympic Stadium properly. He came across as the charming, talented politician that he is. But then Mair took the interview on an unexpected turn and asked Johnson why he'd agreed to be interviewed for the Michael Cockerell documentary. Johnson flannelled before, saying he hadn't seen the programme. Suddenly Mair's tone changed lethally. "But this happened in your life, so you know about this. The Times let you go after you made up a quote. Why did you make up a quote?" And of course, you know the rest of the interview having seen it. But the interesting point here is that the writer of this article, back in 2013, Patrick Winter, the political editor, described it as a bicycle crash for Johnson, that it was probably the worst interview that he'd ever conducted. That shows an individual who didn't realise and doesn't realise what Boris Johnson is. You might watch this and think, goodness me, this isn't making him look good at all. Look at him, sat there smirking like a naughty schoolboy, ignoring the questions, deflecting them, carrying on talking about what he wants to do, as he's basically made out to be a liar, a cheat, and somebody who cooperates in the beating up of another human being. What an odious individual he is, indeed. What a nasty piece of work he is. But the greater prevails. This took place in 2013. Boris Johnson became Prime Minister of the United Kingdom on the 24th of July 2019. Following the general election on the 12th of December 2019, the Conservative Party, Johnson's party, polled their largest share of the vote since 1979, when Margaret Thatcher won her first general election. He won the largest number of seats since 1987, resulting in a landslide victory and a majority of 80. No doubt, as a consequence of that, this nasty piece of work was smirking once again, as the Teflon-coated grater that he is sailed forward. And, no matter what you might describe it as the worst interview or the bicycle crash, it didn't stop him. Testament to the greater, his abilities, and the fact he knows all of this, hence why the greater smirks.